Nearly 2.5 million dead from COVID worldwide, so we're back on Zoom talking to folks around the globe. The United Kingdom has a death rate amongst the highest and a recently discovered faster spreading variant of the virus.
Our friend had COVID. That's how we got this dog.
Emmy Vivak was finding a small upside in this pandemic, a new pal, Florabelle, as she helps its ailing owner nearby.
He's doing better, but he's tired. He's feeling really tired.
Vivakwa grew up in Metro Detroit, now living in London with dogs and kids, schooling at home.
We can go outside for exercise an hour a day. Everybody can. And my favorite thing to do, the only thing you're allowed to do now, is meet a friend and walk and talk and go home. And I'll walk home. I won't take public transportation.
Are people wearing masks in London?
They finally are more now. Because now this is like we've gone from tier 3 to tier 4. They created tier 4, that was new. And then they added on now this national lockdown. So now I am seeing people wearing masks, but like just this afternoon, there was a group of 8 people outside across the street, and half of them had their masks on and half of them didn't. And these were 8 grown-ups just talking to each other, kind of lackadaisical.
Over the channel in the dogleg left lies the Netherlands, with the COVID death rate much lower than Britain and the U.S.
Even among friends here who, have followed the whole issue closely, are a little skeptical about the efficacy of wearing masks, but they are doing it.
Brian Aker, American expat and corporate speechwriter, he works near The Hague. Last spring, while on long-term assignment in the U.S., he caught COVID, recovered, and flew back to the Netherlands.
And I was really kind of shocked. I'd go to the supermarket and you'd see maybe 1 or 2 people out of 100 wearing a mask. And I found out later the reason was the government initially, although it reacted really quickly to do a lockdown in the Netherlands, they didn't push masks. And in fact, sort of the Dutch Dr. Fauci, the chief epidemiologist for the country, he was downplaying masks and was suggesting he didn't really think they were necessary, and really going kind of against the grain of the prevailing medical thought at that time.
Despite that, COVID cases didn't rise there significantly until October, jumping even higher in December. Then came a new lockdown announcement where outside, some unhappy Dutch people could be heard.
When the Prime Minister was giving his address, there was a small group of maybe 24 people outside the government offices who were making a lot of noise. The same thing's happening here that's happened in the States and elsewhere, which is COVID fatigue.
By late January, the unhappiness was more inclusive. Multiple evenings of protest as people burned stuff and hundreds were taken into custody. Other places remained more sedate.
But the Spaniards themselves are great ones for kissing and hugging. Everybody does it all the time. I find it a bit, it's not my style. But
Patrick O'Gara and Rebecca Scott used to work in Toledo, Ohio. And where are you guys?
We are in Moratinos, a village of 20 people in Palencia, in the central north part of Spain.
Spain, a death rate still a bit higher than the U.S., but the current spike proportionately less severe than ours. O'Gara and Scott run a hostel now idle because of COVID along the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage trail.
Well, I'm impressed by how Spain has handled it. We have a socialized health system, and when things were really pretty dire at the beginning of the outbreak, my dentist, who was in private practice, was called up to serve the national system because he's also an anesthesiologist. They put him to work in the hospital. They set aside 2 or 3 floors of the local hospital for COVID patients, and they were preparing that in February. They saw it coming, and they got ready for it. And we're a little tiny regional hospital. We're not a big city place.
On the other side of the world, there's Singapore, a tiny place near Malaysia, Vietnam. Southeast Asia.
Singaporeans know, and people who live here know, that if you don't follow the rules, there will be consequences.
Alyssa Ng lives in the second richest, second densest per capita country on Earth. 5 million packed on an island, but only 29 COVID deaths. They've been in continuous lockdown since last March.
And things are slowly starting to open up again, where I feel like we're very protected in our little bubble.
Masks? Compulsory. Early on, some foreign workers made headlines for not following the law.
They flouted the rules. They hung out in a group that was quite large. I think it was 10 people. They were drinking outside, no mask, and got their visas revoked, and they were sent back to their countries.
Download Trace Together.
Singapore's got a contact tracing app most use called Trace Together.
What you do is you scan a QR code and it takes you to a page. You can see this is where you are and you press check in.
But there's an issue with the app. The government recently admitted the police have access to the data.
Little history, though, you know, back over 100 years ago, they called it the Spanish flu, a major pandemic. And
Now this is the Chinese flu, isn't it? Yeah.
do you call it the Chinese flu or the
No,
China
we don't.
virus?
No, never.
The Donald does.
Well, do they call it the China virus in the
No,
Netherlands?
no, it's COVID or coronavirus.
Do they call it the China virus in England?
I've never heard that. I mean, I've only heard that from American news.
Do they call it the China virus in Singapore?
We do not. That could also be, so we know it originated in China. Like, it's not a fact that's being questioned, but also the fact that Singapore is 70% Chinese ethnicity wise. We are quite sensitive to racial and cultural judgments. We're quite multicultural, so no one really called it the China virus, which I think is good.